Begin the Gemara today on Daf Gimel Amud Beis towards the bottom of the Yamud. The Gemara here brought a machlekes, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, regarding a aver min hameis, one limb that comes from a body that does not have basa karoi on it. Basa karoi means flesh that it could live if it was attached to a live body. So the Mishnah said that the regular tumah would not apply in such a case. Regular tumah means even tumas oihel. But the question is, whether the tumah of mageh or masa, whether you touch it or carry it, does that tumah apply to this aver that doesn't have the basar on it? So Rabbi Yochanan says that it does not. There's no tumah at all in such a case. And Rish Lakish says there still is tumah. Not the tumah of oil, but the tumah of mageh masa does apply. So the Gemara now will explain in what case they're arguing. The Gemara, hi aver min hameis, this argument regarding this aver min hameis that has no flesh on it. Hey chidami, what is the case here? If it has the size of a bone, like a barley, so then my time with Rabbi Yochanan. Why would Rabbi Yochanan say that the tumah of touching it does not apply? This is the rule. Whenever there's an etzem that's the size of a barley, that's the size where the tumah smaga applies. So why would this be any different? If it's not the size of a bone that like a barley, so my time with the Rish Lakish. Why would Rish Lakish say that here the tumah of maga does apply? If it's smaller than that size, the rule is that the tumah of touch does not apply. So the Gemara answers, Rish Lakish will tell you, the less pay etzem keseda. Really the case over here is, we're speaking about a bone that's smaller than the size of a barley. So this must be like from a bone that came from a body from a baby, and it comes from one of the very small joints in the body, that it could even be smaller than a body, smaller than a barley, that is, but it's a full bone though. The point is it's a full joint, a full bone. And nevertheless, we learn from a pasuk that if it's a full bone, even if it's smaller than a barley, and it doesn't have flesh on it, it's still going to cause tumah. But the tumah of maga, of touch, not the tumah of oil, but the tumah of touch. And he brings here the source of this, and here the Gemara is going to bring two braises. One braise that goes through various details of the tumah of oil, and another braise that goes through various details in the tumah of maga, where the tumah of oil does not apply, but only the tumah of maga, of touch. And one of them will be a source for what Rish Lakish is saying here.
What's the difference?
Difference between?
Oil and maga.
Oil is when it's under the same roof, tent or roof.
Oh, right.
And then there's the tumah of maga, which is touch.
Okay.
So the Tanya we learned in the braise. This is in Parshas Chukas, where it says all the details regarding the paraduma when a person has to have the waters of the paraduma sprayed at him. So it says, that's one pasuk. So when it says al pnei asada, you touch something which is on the pnei asada, on the surface of the field. What is this expression referring to? It doesn't say that you touched the mace itself. It said you touched al pnei asada. So from this we learn out al pnei asada ze amal al pnei mace. That refers to the fact that the person did not actually touch the mace itself, but he went over the surface of this field where there is a mace, and he formed a tent over it, a covering over it. That causes tumah. This is the tumah of oil. Then the pasuk there continues and says, "B'chalal, b'chalal ze'evim min achai." If you have one limb of a body that was detached, that was slain, and was detached from the body, v'yesh lo lahalis harucha. If it has flesh on it, that it could live, that it could be healthy, and it was slain, it was cut from the body, that also causes tumah, and even a tumas oihel as well. Then the pasuk says cherev. What is it? Why is the pasuk specifying a sword, a metal sword? Because here from where we learn out cherev harei zeh kecholol. A sword, metal that touches the mace itself, gets the level of tumah just like the mace itself. If you touch the cherev, this metal, this cherev, it's like touching the mace himself. Then it says oy b'mace. Why is it saying again oy b'mace? Ze eiver hanechlal min hameis. This refers to one limb that comes from the slain body, from the mace. Oy be'etzem adam. Then it says etzem adam. Ze roiva atzamos. This is the amount of a quarter of a kav of bones that causes tumah, and even tumas oihel as well. Then it concludes in the pasuk there. It says oy bekever. What does that mean? Ze kever sasum. This is a kever that's closed, and if a person will touch or go over the kever, not even without touch, even just form an oil over the kaver, you also become tamei. Taisus over here says that the chiddush is that by a kaver, even if the person goes over the kaver in a section of the kaver where the mace, he's not actually over the mace himself, but nevertheless the pasuk says if you're over the kaver, so then it will cause tumah as well. The Gemara brings on this, the Omamar, the master has said, Tumeh by kas va'oile by kas v'yeredes. Tumeh, which is inside the area. So now this is referring to a place when you have tumeh inside an area and there's no space of a tefach inside that area. The rule is when you have a tumeh, a mace that's inside a tent or inside any area, inside a box or whatever it may be, if inside there's a space of a tefach between the wall and where the mace is, or the roof and where the mace is, so then the tumeh gets secluded and stuck inside that area. It does not leave from that area. But if the mace is inside an area and there's no space of a tefach, then this rule over here applies. Because for Eila, the tumah will break through and it goes all the way up to the sky, and because for Yeredes, it goes all the way down to the Tahaim in that area. And this is connected to what we just said regarding the kaver, that it goes up out of the kaver, and therefore over the kaver you'll have tumah there. Taisus actually says that this concept of bekas v'oila, bekas v'yeredes does not really fit into the Gemara here, because the chiddush by the kaver is that the tumah is metamayu even when you're not above the actual mace itself, even on the sides of the kaver where the mace is not there. So that's a little bit different than this halacha of bekas va'oila, bekas v'yeredes. That's what Taisus says. Okay, so all of this is the level of tumah where there's not only a tumah if you touch or carry, but also the tumah of oil when you form a covering over it. Now the Gemara continues. There's another kind of tumah. When it comes to the tumah, where you're only tumah if you touch or carry. So Amar Rav Yehuda, or some take out Amar Rav Yehuda. Tanya, we learned in the Braises, so it says there in that same parsha, another pasuk. Va'ala negeya be'etzame b'cholol. And there's a continuation over there in the pasuk. It enumerates different things. It says afterwards, bekover. So here, this part of the pasuk begins with negeya. So here we're talking about things that are caused tumah not by oil, only by negeya, by touching it. So when it says in the pasuk be'etzem, ze etzem keseira, this is the source of this idea that there's a tumah of etzem. If it's the size of a barley, it causes tumah. Oy b'cholol, then when it says cholol, ze eva nechlal menachai, this is a limb that comes from a living body, a living person, and bevein b'lahalas harucha. But here, this aver does not have the flesh on it that it could live. Oy b'meis, ze eva nechlal menameis. This is one bone that came from a mace also that doesn't have enough flesh in it that it could live. Oy bekever, what does it mean here when it says bekever? How is this kever different than what it said before? Why is it saying it again? Omer Rish Lakish says, ze kever shalifnei adibur. This is speaking about a person that was buried before this dibur here, before Matan Torah, that will also cause tumah. There are various perushim in the Rishonim, what the chiddush of this is. Why would I think that a yid that was buried from before Matan Torah it shouldn't be tamei? So one pshat that the Rosh or Taisus here says is that this is telling you regarding the kaver of a guy. Right? Even regarding a guy that the kaver shalifnei adibur, that it also causes tumah. Another pshat that Taisus says is that no, it's referring to the kaver of a yid, but it's saying regarding the kaver of a yid, you may think that only a yid that was buried after Matan Torah causes tumah. Not from before. So it says, no, even a yid that was buried from before Matan Torah also causes tumah. Okay, there's other pshatim here. It's connected to a Gemara in Yevamis that discusses this concept. Okay, so now the Gemara explains where Rish Lakish takes his chiddush from. So now, what does it say here in the Braisa? In the second Braisa that we just learned. Hi, Evim and Ameis, when it says here that I learn out that one aver that comes from a mace and does not have that flesh on it, that it could live. So heichidami, what is the case? What is the case that it's saying that it causes the tumah of negi, of touch, and not the tumah of oil? If this ava has the size of a barley, it's the same thing that it already learned out from the previous word, be'etzem, that it has that size. Ella, so it must be the less be'etzem kesaira. It does not have that size like a barley. And nevertheless, the Torah is saying as long as it's a full aver, even though it's a tiny aver, it's so tiny that it's even smaller than a barley, but if it's a full aver, even if it doesn't have any flesh in it, it'll cause the tumah of negiah. So here I see, like Rish Lakish's chiddush. Rav Yechanan will answer to this and say, Lo'ilam de ispe. No, really, this aver here that we're speaking about does have the size of a barley. The question was, if so, I already learned out that etzem kisa'ira is metame tumas maga cholanegeya be'etzem. Even though the context of the pasuk is speaking about touching, but since I don't need this for touching, what it's teaching me is that not only will it be metame if you touch it, but it'll be metame even if you carried it, and you carried it without touching it. still it'll be metame you as well. That's what it's coming to teach. Okay, the Gemara does not explain from where the Shlakish knows this halacha of masa. There's always three ways of being tame, either oil, maga, and masa. So Rabbi Yechanan says that it has to teach me both maga and masa, but that it should be metame. This etzem kisaire, if it does not, this avim and ames rather, this avim and ames that does not have on it a size of a saire, or it does not have the flesh on it, it's not going to be metame at all, according to Rabbi Yechanan. Okay, going back to the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, after all of the whole list of cases where it says that a Nazir has to restart his Naziris over again. So what's the halacha by a Nazir? He has to be metired himself for 7 days. Shlishi and Shvi, you have to spray in him the waters of the Par Aduma. Then on the 7th day, he goes to the mikveh. And then what happens? At night, head of Shemesh. And then the next day, on the 8th day, he brings his karbanis. Okay, so now, in the Lashon that it said before in the Mishnah, a while ago, Daf Mem Tesam at Beis, the Mishnah there says that ve'einu maschel limnois ela achi yitar. He doesn't start recounting his naziris until he becomes tired. On that's what the Gemara is going on. A masa b'shlishi u'b'shvi v'saisa v'chulu. Now, by Elohu, the Shaila was asked, what's pshat in the Mishnah? Hadek tani achi yitar. When it says in the Mishnah that he only could restart counting his naziris until he becomes tired, what does that mean? Bashvi koi. Does this refer to the 7th day? Ad David had of Shemesh until sundown after the 7th day. So this is the girsa we have here in our Gemara. But Taisvis and the Rosh both take out these words Ad had of Shemesh. And according to this approach, the Gemara is saying now Achiyita means on the 7th day itself after he goes to the mikveh without waiting until night. Umani Rabbi Lazihi. And if so, our mission would be following Rabbi Laz's opinion. We had this earlier in the Masechta a while ago. The Gemara they learned out from a pasuk. I don't remember now what the pasuk was, but there was a pasuk. It's in Daf. They bring it over here. What's the pasuk? Oh, the Kiddush Reishai Bayoim Hahu. Right, those words Bayoim Hahu. So Rabbi Laza says Bayoim Hahu means on the 7th day. It's extra words saying on 7th, even though he didn't bring his karbanis yet. So he's not fully done with completing what he had to do after being tamei, but still, on the 7th day already, he starts recounting. That's one way we can understand our Mishnah. Or maybe Bashminikai, when it says over here in the Mishnah, Achayitar, it means the 8th day. It means until he's fully done, until he's fully tar, which is on the following day, Umani Rabbanani. This is like the opinion of the Rabbanah. Tashema, so the Gemara says, I'll prove it to you from the language of the Mishnah itself. Because Mediktani safe, what does it say in the next Mishnah, which we're about to learn? The next Mishnah gives the list of cases where you don't have to start recounting all the days of your Naziris. A case where a person became Tamei, but he could sort of resume his Naziris where he was holding when he's Metayed himself. So in the next Mishnah, the Lashon that it uses is Maschil Umayne Miyad. When he's Metayed himself, as soon as he becomes tired, he can immediately resume his Naziris. So there it uses this lashon, Mayne miyad, ha reisha. So from this I understand that in the reisha, in the Mishnah that we're talking about before, my ache yitar, over here it doesn't say miyad, it says ache yitar, uses a different terminology. Until it becomes tired, what does that mean? Ache yavi karbanaisav. It's using the different terminology because it's coming to say that he has to be fully tired, and which means even the 8th day when he brings his karbanis. Umani Rabbananhi. So therefore we could understand that our Mishnah is following the Rabbanan's opinion, the Amri, Naziros, the Tara, Achmini Lechayla. To start again your Naziris of Tara after you became totally Tameh, that you have to restart all the days of your Naziris, that's only on the 8th day after you finish bringing all your Karbanis. Okay, so now here in this Mishnah, as I said, it'll list the different cases where a person does become Tameh, but it does not mevatel all his previous days of Naziris, and you don't have to bring the Karbanis for this. You just have to be Matar yourself, and you can just continue counting your Naziris where you were holding. It interrupts your Naziris, but you can continue going where you were holding with the days of your Naziris.
So if Kabbalah Akib is Machlekes.
Yeah, before, but again, you have to bring the Karbanis, but the question is, that the Gemara was discussing before is, when do you restart counting your Naziris? Do you have to wait to the 8th day or only on the 7th day? But here we're talking about cases that you will not have to bring Karbanis. Let's see. But if a person became Tameh by going under schachais, schachais means you go under the shade of trees. And it's shade of trees in an area where it could be that it was a mace there, it could be a mace was not there. That's one pshat in the Gemara. Another pshat over here is that There's a few pshatim rishonim. Another pshat Rashi says schachais is not a situation where you know that a mace was buried. You're just not sure exactly under which tree. Rashi says chachamim b'chlal v'geizer, that when you walk under the shade of trees, that midrabanan you become tamei, because the derech of the goyim or of different people was to bury in a shady area. So whenever you walk under the shade of a tree, it's possible that there's a mace buried there. It's another pshat. Another pshat that it says in the rishonim is schachais is trees, that even if you know for a fact that there's a mace buried there, minatayre, you don't have tumah, even though seemingly you have a oihel, you have a roof over this mace and you should be tameh. But schachais are trees where it's not a solid roof. It's very flimsy. You can't put weight on it and it won't hold. So such a kind of a oil which is very flimsy does not cause tumah minatayre. So it's only tumah midrabanan. Another example, price. Price is when you have a brick that's protruding from a wall and you walked under that brick. So again, you have these various pshatim that I just mentioned, either because it's very flimsy, so it's not the proper oil, or because it's a suffix, whether there's a mace there, or because it's the derech of people, so it's a tumah midrabanan, same kind of concept. Or ubeis hapras. Beis hapras is an area where there was a caver in that sadeh, and it was plowed, and this caver that was there was lost. It was removed, but it could be that there's still bones spread around in this place. Pras either means that they spread around bones in this area, or pras could also mean cut into different pieces. It could be possible different pieces of a mace left in this area. So it's a tumah midrabanan. We're not, there's no tumah here, but midrabanan, there's still a tumah in this area. And also the Eretz Ha'amim, leaving Eretz Yisrael, entering into Chutz La'aretz, Chachamim will geize that when you enter into Chutz La'aretz, both in the ground of Chutz La'aretz and even the airspace of Chutz La'aretz, you become Tamei Midrabanan. V'hagoylil v'hadoifik. And the goylil is the top of a caver, and the doifik is the side of a caver, which is also a Tamei Midrabanan. If you touch that, even if you're not forming an oil over the mace, just by touching it, you become Tamei, but it's only a Tamei Midrabanan. Or Revi is dam, also regarding a Revi is dam. So we learned in the previous Mishnah that by Nazir specifically, there's Allah Sinai that the tumah of a Nazir that'll have to restart his Naziris, it has to be a Chatzi Lug dam. So over here, if it was only a Revius of dam, or V'oil V'roiva Atzamis, if it's a Roiva of bones, and some take out the Vav of the V'roiva, V'oil Roiva Atzamis, the tumah of Roiva Atzamis, so it's going to be Metamayu only if you touch it. But over here, we're talking about a person that had this roiva of bones in the same oil where he is, and not without touch. So again, that's not going to be metama on Nazir fully. The kalim hanoigim b'meis, or you didn't touch the mace directly, you touched kalim that are touching a mace. The Rishonim say that means that the kalim are still touching the mace, not that the kalim was touched by a mace, but you're touching kalim which are presently touching the mace. Ubimei sifroi, ubimei gomroi. Another thing is regarding a mitzayre. There's different stages of a person that becomes a mitzayre. Mei sifroi means a mitzayre that's already coming back into the machna and he's counting his days. He has to count 7 days to be mitayr himself. So here he has these days that he's counting to be mitayr himself. Or mei gomroi means those days that he's completed to be a full mitzayre and he's out of the machna. So those days that he's tamei as a mitzayre, so it interrupts his nazirus, but it does not, this tumah of mitzayre will not cause him to have to restart his nazirus again. So al elu, regarding all these cases, ein hanazir megaleach, the nazir will not have to cut his hair and restart his entire nazirus. Regarding the mitzayre, actually, this mitzayre does have to cut his hair. A mitzayre, when he completes his tzaras, he does have to cut his hair, but he doesn't have to cut his hair because of the fact that he was metame his nazirus. Umaze b'shlishi u'b'shvi. All these cases, he was tamei, whether a suffix tamei, whether a tamei with the rabbanon. So he will have to have the water sprayed at him on the 3rd and 7th day to wait 7 days. But the eines seiser es hakaydmim. It does not nullify his previous days of Naziris that he kept. He could immediately resume his Naziris. As soon as he's metar himself, he just continues wherever he was holding with his Naziris. And the carbon ainloy. Also, he doesn't have to bring any carbon for his Naziris. Be'emes amru, in truth it was said, whenever it uses this expression, it means it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Yimei Yazav, a person that said Nazir, and during his days of Nazirus, he became a Zav. It's an emission of the body that causes Tumah. Or V'hazava, regarding an Akeva, the same thing, that she had an emission that causes Tumah. Or V'yimei Hezgeire Shel Mitzayre, or the days of a Mitzayre, not after he was already verified to be a Mitzayra and he was sent out of the Machne, but those days that he was locked up because it wasn't yet determined 100% that he's a Mitzayra, there's also a certain level of Tumah then. But Harei Elu Eilen Loi, these days, not only does it not nullify all the days of your Nazirus, it doesn't even interrupt the days of your Nazirus. You can continue counting your days of Nazirus while you're a Zav, or while you're in these days of Hesger, when you're locked up as a Mitzayra, when it's not yet 100% determined that you're a Mitzayra. So this is another level. This is a level of Tumah that doesn't b'chlal interrupt your Nazirus at all. This is the meaning of schachais. The tree that's hovering over, that's hanging over the ground, and so a person went over that shade. And price, similar thing, you have the bricks that are protruding from a wall, and a person walked under that. So the Rishonim over here clarify that we're talking here about this tree or this brick that's hanging over all in Rishus Harabim, especially according to the pshat that I said before. I'm not sure if this is true according to all Rishonim, but according to the pshat that I said before, that we're talking here about a situation of Safek Tumah. So this has to be in Rishus Harabim, because the rule always is Safek Tumah in Rishus Hayachid is 100% Tumah, Min HaTorah. So then that would be a full Tumah. This has to be in Rishus Harabim, where it's Safek Tumah, and Rishus Harabim, the rule is that Min HaTorah, Safek Tumah, Rishus Harabim is not Tumah. So then this is only a Tumah with the Rabbanon. Okay, the next thing it said in the Mishnah was Eretz Ha'amim. That Chachamim were geyser, you leave Eretz Yisrael, you enter into Eretz Ha'amim, you become Tumah with the Rabbanon. The Shaila was asked about the nature of this Tumah. Eretz Ha'amim, a person that enters into Eretz Ha'amim, what's this Tumah? Mishum Avira Gazru Aleh, or Chachamim geyser because of the very air space itself causes Tumah. Aidilma Mishum Gusha Gazru Aleh. Or Chachamim were geyser because of the gush, meaning the actual earth itself, that is Tameh. The air space itself is not Tameh, it's the gush that's Tameh. Okay, so what is the meaning of the Sibaya? So first of all, practically what the Sibaya means is, it's possible for a person to enter into Eretz Ha'amim without setting a foot on the ground itself. He's in a box, he's in some kind of enclosure, and he's he's on top of a donkey, or he's in a way that he's not touching the gush of Eretz Ha'amim. The Gemara will later call it Shida, Teva, or Migdal. He's in, so we had it before. Right? He's inside some kind of enclosure, and therefore he doesn't touch the good, right in the ear. So the question is whether it'll become tummy or not. And a plane as well, correct? Yeah, Bisman Hazeh. If you're in a plane, that would be a similar shaila, that you're in the Avir of Eretz Ha'amim. Exactly. Okay, but now most Rishonim say the pshat of the Gemara when it says Mishum Avira or Mishum Gusha, the shaila here is not whether there is tumah in the airspace itself or not. Because there's really a Gemara in Shabbos that says that Chachamim were geyser tumah in the airspace. But the shaila over here is, why are you tumah in Eretz Ha'amim in the airspace? Is it because Chachamim really were only geyser tumah on the gush, on the ground itself? And the reason for that gzeira is, so the Rishonim here bring a few reasons. Either because Goyim bury in places without ever making a kever, and you don't even know that anyone was ever buried there. Or they say, actually, another Taisus here says the reason also is because of the mabel, all the dead bodies that were just buried wherever it is, and therefore that itself, that there's leftovers, remnants from these bodies from the time of the mabel yet, that causes tumah on the gush. So really the tumah is based on the fact that it's the ground itself that's a kaver, that's tameh. Elamai, when you're in the airspace, so because wherever you're walking, you're forming an oil over the ground that has a tumah of a kaver in it, so therefore even if you won't touch the ground itself, but you're forming an oil over it, so therefore that's why the aver will be tumah. So it's not the aver in itself that Chachamim were geyser the tumah, it's the fact that you're forming an oil over the ground. That's actually the second way that the Gemara says, Mishum Gusha. When the Gemara says Mishum Avira Gazru Aleh, what the Gemara is saying is that the Tumeh Chachamim wa Geyser has nothing to do with the fact that there's maybe Kvarim in the ground, but the Chachamim wa Geyser on the very airspace itself, that it is the source that causes Tumeh. And the reason is Chachamim did not want Eden to leave Eretz Yisrael. Right? We know that if a person lives in Eretz Yisrael, you're not supposed to leave Eretz Yisrael. So since they didn't want people to leave Eretz Yisrael, they were geyser tumah on the very airspace itself. Even if you're enclosed in a box and you didn't touch the ground, not only you didn't touch, but you didn't even form any oil over the ground. That's the Gemara's shaila. So the Gemara tries to prove it from a Mishnah. Toshama, what did it say in a Mishnah regarding this person that goes out? One of the cases was going into Eretz Ha'amim, the Rumaza b'shlishu b'shvi, that you have to spray in him the waters of the Paraduma on the 3rd and 7th day. Now the question is, if you're going to say that this tumah chachamim v'geizer is not at all related to the fact that in the ground there could be a tumah of mace. It's just because of the ear space. Chachamim v'geizer, this brand new concept that the ear space itself causes tumah because they didn't want you to leave Eretz Yisrael. So hazal lamali. Why would you have to spray the waters of the Parah Aduma? This is a gzeirim midrabanan, nothing to do with tumas mace. The ear itself causes tumah. So why does the halacha of spraying from the Parah Aduma, which only applies to tumas mace, why does that apply over here if it's only in the ear space, which is not related to tumas mace? Elalav mishum gusha. So doesn't that prove to you that the tumen eretz ha'amim is because of the ground, which is because of the mason that could be buried there, and that's why you have to spray the waters of the Parah Aduma. So the Gemara says there's no rai from a Mishnah. I can still tell you the tumen eretz ha'amim is based on just the ear space itself could cause tumen, not related to tumas mace. When it says in our Mishnah that you have to spray the waters of the Parah Aduma on the 3rd and 7th day, ashara. There's a whole list in the Mishnah. It's going on the other cases mentioned in the Mishnah. And the Gemara proves this. Hachanami mistavra. I'll prove this to you. Mediktani, one of the other cases it said in our Mishnah was v'kelim anoigim b'meis. If you touch a vessel that's touching the mace, hani kelim b'nei azon inun. If you didn't touch the mace himself, you just touched a keli that's touching a mace. Do you have to have the waters of the Parah Aduma sprinkled on you? You don't. And still it said that in the Mishnah. So you must say that when it says that in the Mishnah, it's not going on every single case in the Mishnah. It doesn't refer to the case of Kalim. So it also doesn't refer to this case of entering into Eretz Ha'amim. So there's no raya from our Mishnah to this question.